we are here to discuss one thing and one thing only. It is this zombie lie that will not go away, that a lot of people believe, because there are a lot of pundits out there on both sides of the aisle, to be honest, who keep saying that Congress has stolen the money from the Social Security Trust Fund. The floor is yours.
I've heard that. Yes. So what can I say about that? It's not true. I'll say that first of all. Let's talk about the trust fund. The trust fund's like a savings account. For many years, Social Security collected more in payroll taxes than they paid out in benefits. And the money ended up in the Social Security Trust Fund. Just like if your family earns more income than you spend, your money ends up in a savings account. Once it gets in the trust fund, there's an element here. Did the government take that money and use it for something? Yes, they did. They borrowed it. They borrowed it from the trust fund, just like when you put money in a savings account at a bank, the bank lends that money to other people. It's still your money. Nobody's stealing it. They're paying you interest. The trust fund gets interest on the money that the federal government has borrowed from it. And today, the trust fund has been running a deficit since several years ago now. And every year, Social Security Trust Fund receives interest payments from the federal government. The Social Security Trust Fund, it peaked at about $2.9 trillion. And today, I looked it up, it's $2.77 trillion. That the trust fund is not zero. Now, that $2.77 trillion has largely been lent to the federal government, and the federal government pays interest on it, just like the federal government pays interest on treasury bonds and notes that they issue to finance the rest of their debt. So the only thing that's going on here is Social Security is lending their money to the federal government and getting interest payments on it and getting the money back. And for the last 4 years, the trust fund has been shrinking slightly in value because we're spending more than we're collecting in payroll taxes. We know the trust fund's supposed to run out of money about 2035, and that's happening slowly. It's accelerating, and it's going to happen if we don't do something about this. But all of this is not that the money magically disappeared or somebody stole it. Nobody stole this money. The only thing you could possibly complain about is that the Social Security Trust Fund lends the money to the federal government instead of investing in the stock market or something. But that's so risky that I think many people wouldn't want to know that their retirement was depending on the stock market.
Isn't the money in government bonds too? The money that's invested also, and isn't that the safest usually?
It is the safest. No, you're relying on the federal government to pay you back, and they will. I mean, first of all, if they can't pay you back, it's a disaster. And second of all, and this gets into inflation and all, but they promise to pay you back in dollars, and they print dollars. So there's no way they can't pay you back. If you want to look at the socialsecurity.gov website, you can see the amount of money that's been saved in the trust fund, and you can see the interest rate that the trust fund is earning. I looked today over since 1990, I looked up the 10-year treasury bond rate. So this is what the US government borrows money from millions of people, and they pay interest. And on these 10-year treasury bonds, the interest rate has been less than what the Social Security Trust Fund is being credited with in interest earnings every year from 1990 until a year or so ago. And a year or so ago, the interest rate that the Treasury is paying Social Security fell below the 10-year Treasury bill rate. And it's kind of complicated to explain, but it's largely that the Social Security Trust Fund invested and interest rates were low a few years ago, and they've still got those bonds on their books. But all I can say is that the money's not been stolen. It's been lent. It's been lent to the federal government under what I'd consider fairly advantageous interest rates. And there it is.
And let's be clear, because you were saying before about how the government has lent out this, or why the trust fund specifically has gone down. The trust fund has been depleted because you said the government is spending that money to pay people. But specifically for the Social Security
Oh,
program.
I'm sorry. Absolutely right. The reason the trust fund is declining in value is that the Social Security payroll tax revenue is not enough to pay benefits to all retirees and disabled people and others who are collecting Social Security benefits. It's only Social Security spending that gets subtracted from the trust fund. So the trust fund collects payroll taxes. It also collects interest payments from the federal government on this investments, and it pays out money to retirees.
So
And it's currently not earning enough interest plus payroll taxes to pay out. It has to actually spend some of the principal of the trust fund, and that's what's going on.
to be clear, when it comes to this trust fund, if the government weren't lending this money out to the federal government, you know, with the,
Right.
if they weren't using the trust fund money to lend it out, we would have even less in that
Absolutely.
trust fund because of interest rates.
We wouldn't have gotten interest on the money we put. If they had just taken the money and stuck it in a vault, and I mean, no one in their right mind would do this, but if they took the money and stuck it in a vault, you would get no interest, and all of those interest payments we've been receiving over the years, we'd never would have gotten, and the trust fund would be smaller today than it is. Okay. Just like your bank account, it would be smaller if you didn't earn interest on it versus if you do earn interest.